All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Monday Mobile, North Carolina Realtors Association. I am Aaron Bopp with SKA Consulting Engineers. We are a multidisciplinary engineering company that is headquartered in Greensboro, North Carolina. We do have a few other offices around the Southeast in Virginia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. I'm a licensed engineer in 4 different states and practicing in structural engineering primarily. Today, I want to talk to you about the importance of the due diligence process, and in particular with condition assessments and inspections that are related to due diligence. And while every building, every project, every structure is unique, this particular topic is relative to all shapes and sizes of facilities. Locations, what type of real estate transaction it is. It really is across the board. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about a couple of different things with the due diligence inspection process, and we want to try and cover why due diligence inspections are important, and what do we actually gain from the inspection process, how do we go about it, and then ultimately how we apply the results. And so we'll get going with it. And again, hopefully it's not too engineering, too nerdy here. And we'll have a place where at the end we'll post contact information where if you do have specific questions or need some answers to some of those engineering issues, we can certainly try and help you out with that. So the first thing is we probably all agree that the due diligence process is really important. It's important in general. We want to be careful about the things that we do, especially in today's world where we can really get ourselves into a lot of trouble if we're not careful. And it's not even something that we've done, it's something that other people can do to us. So checking out stuff is really, really important. I don't think that's in question. In particular, though, when it comes to real estate transactions, these are often some of the largest investments that we make, whether it's a home, a residence where you plan to raise a family and spend a lot of your time, whether it's simply an investment of your money, or it's a location for an office, something where you're going to conduct your business. They are typically very large, important decisions that we make. They stay with us for a long time, years certainly, even decades sometimes. And so going through the process, spending a little time making sure that we're careful about it, it's going to behoove all of us. And let's be honest, the bank is going to want to make sure that we've done our part to make sure that things are okay too. So as we look at it, we find something that we like, whether, building, house, we really fall in love with it. It's exciting, but we don't know what we don't know. I don't know who said that. One of the things I don't know, but it is something that we need to investigate. So our ability to really assess the full transaction, aside from the personal side of it, it really comes down to information and how good is the information that we have. And really, just having information isn't the only part. We have to be able to understand the information. We can have a book of a condition assessment talking about 400 different points, but if we don't understand what those mean and ultimately how that affects us, that information really is not doing us a whole lot of good. Another thing is typically, the problems are from areas that we can't see, concealed conditions, and they can exist all over the place. Insect damage. How many people crawl up into the crawl spaces to look at the wood joist? Or foundation issues. Again, it's hard to pick up on foundation issues. There's certain things that are perceptive, that are signs, but typically ground is not something that we look at. Leaking pipes, old or improper wiring, aged mechanical systems, and the list really goes on and on. There's a lot of different things that could potentially affect, seemingly an endless list. And so with that, why or how do we actually bring ourselves to make purchases? Well, one of the ways that we can do it is to engage qualified professionals to assist us with acquiring and understanding the information, what we have out there and what we're going to get ourselves into. And so there's different sides to the industry. Residential market, there's a lot of um, businesses that are out there and professionals that are out there that are much more general in nature, and there are home inspectors. And they have a really good working knowledge of the overall building code related to residences. And, you know, they do very thorough checks. Sometimes it's one individual who has a really good understanding of everything. Sometimes it's a team of individuals that go out, and they have specialties. Again, it's not one for one, but they may cross over into a couple of different disciplines and really have a good idea to go through and point out potential problems. Typically, they're not licensed engineers or contractors, but that's not always the case. We definitely have some. But they're more general and less specialized. And if they find something that seems to be an issue, then they typically recommend that a licensed engineer or contractor be contacted and follow up. The commercial market is a little different. Typically, the commercial transactions are handled by licensed engineers. Again, the building code, look, a lot of tags there, a lot of different stuff. The actual commercial building code is a little less prescriptive and more calculations involved. And another thing that's different is typically involves the general public, whether it's a private institution, business, church, something along those lines, or it's a public building. Typically, public is involved with commercial properties of one sort or another. And therefore, there's a greater risk of life and or potential problem. And so it takes a different level. There's different requirements to it. So engaging qualified, licensed engineers or contractors that can go through and assist that is very, very important. My company does this type of work, and we have disciplines for the full building services. We recently completed one in Florida, for instance, and it took a team of 5 individuals a full week to go through and do nothing but a visual assessment and type up a report. And I think our report is closing in on 400 pages at this point in time. So little different scale, a little different magnitude than the residential inspection, but still same premise. We want to check it out. We want to know what is going on with it. We want to be sure that we understand the exact condition of the building. Very important, so that we know what we're getting ourselves into. One thing that's somewhat difficult, and typically engineers are not, fall into this category, that we typically are told that we're not typically told that we need to separate our emotions from our work. And so we tend to look at things factual, which in this case is actually very good. Separating the emotion is a very important part of this process, because with these large investments, again, in particular with residential applications where we're going to be living in there, it's very hard to do that. But when you go in this, it's a statement of fact. We really just need to know what's going on, and then we can use that statement of fact to assess the situation. We need to get away from the thought that we are looking for problems, because that's not really the case. Certainly we're looking for issues. We're looking to understand exactly what's going on with the property, but we're not necessarily looking for problems to leverage price points. It's not really how it's about. We're trying to find out what is good, what is bad, what is operating properly, and what is not. And then we present that information to the buyer and to the seller. And really, it's a means of protection. We want to protect both the buyer and the seller. Again, the buyer from the perspective that, hey, what are we getting ourselves into here? What are we going to have in a year, 2 years, 10 years from now? And really from the seller, because sellers don't want to be accused of concealing something or hiding it, trying to cover it up. Again, that could cause problems down the road and lawsuits, and really nobody wins in that situation. Once we've gone through it, we get our report, we've done our inspections, we have a team come out, we have the mechanical systems have been reviewed, structural systems reviewed, we have all this data, this big report. What do we do with it? Okay, this is when, to some degree, the personal side does come in, because we have to weigh the advantages and disadvantages, the good with the bad on this whole process. Every building has problems. Every building, brand new, 1,000 years old, big, small, wood, concrete, doesn't matter. They all have problems. And so that's a given. You should understand this when you go into it. It's really just the severity of the problems and to determine if it's actually a problem. It's, people don't want to hear this or they don't believe that I say it, but just because there's a code issue doesn't necessarily equate to a problem. Codes change over time, they certainly do, and you need to bring them up to code. You need to get current, and there's reasons for all of that. And I'm not suggesting that shouldn't stay with, outside of the code, because that's not true at all. But just because there's a code issue doesn't necessarily mean that there's a problem. That's when the expertise, the judgment, and calculations come into play from engineers, whether it's structural, mechanical, all the different disciplines. And so we can help evaluate whether a code issue is actually a problem for the building. And a lot of times it isn't. Once you get that, again, you're back to the global picture. Do I love this property? Really do. But we got a couple of issues here. Can we get it fixed? Is it worth it? Absolutely, can certainly help with that process. Again, being from the structural side, we get a lot in North Carolina here. We get a lot of feedback and questions and concerns about structural foundation issues. Okay, there's I'm sure some of you have gone through this process where you get a home inspection report or you get you see some cracks in a building, cracks in the masonry, cracks in plaster, whatever it is. And so it needs to be evaluated by a structural engineer. Okay, buildings move. Every building does. Skyscrapers, some of them move a couple of feet. Some buildings, even houses, they're much smaller. Their aspect ratio is different. They're going to move less, but they're going to move. They move with temperature. They move with moisture. They move with wind. They move with earthquakes, wherever it is. They move. We build them to move. And so you're going to see some of that cracking. Again, settlement of the soil is another thing that I'm sure you all have heard about. You get some cracking because of settlement. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a problem. Here in North Carolina, we have a lot of clay soils, and clay has a tendency to swell and contract a lot more than normal soils do. And we see it a lot when there's a drought or a period of very heavy rains, a lot of moisture. You're going to get that volume movement of the soils. It's going to swell, and thus the house is going to swell up with it, and it's going to shrink when it gets into that drought, and the house is going to move along with it. Cracks occur. You can deal with the cracks. We can, tuck point them. We can help with sealing them, making sure that moisture doesn't get into it and create additional problems. But 95% of the time, 90 to 95% of the time, it's not actually a problem. It's just something where the building is moved at one point in time, a crack has developed. We want to make sure that we understand why it moved, when it moved, and how we can deal with any future performance of it. Again, something that is a hard thing, especially when you see cracks and you hear potential foundation issues, start to get that feeling of uneasiness. Well, let us help you. Certainly can do that. Here to reassure you. Again, I'm not expert in everything. In fact, I'm an expert only in very select things. But when it comes to dealing with foundation issues, maybe talk you through it. And again, ultimately, you may decide to move in a different direction, but at least you'll have all the information. It'll be accurate information, and you can use that to assess whether or not to move forward. Really appreciate your time. Again, I know it's we're getting close to the holidays and hectic season, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. If you do have questions, you do have concerns, we're going to post my contact information on here. And again, I'm structural, but I can certainly get you in contact with other people, mechanical systems, electrical, windows, envelope type stuff, roofing, if you need it. And we are absolutely happy to help any way that we can. I hope you all have a safe and happy holiday and a great 2018. Thanks.